Hey guys, Jim here, and in this episode, I want to cover what are the typical reasons why you have foundation issues.
Helping you make smarter choices.
Number one, it's going to be tree roots. Number two, it's going to be having old copper pipes, copper high pressure lines. Number three, it's going to be your sewer lines. Number four, it's going to be poor drainage. And number five, it's going to have to do with your soil, the climate. Okay. So number one, with trees, you typically are going to have foundation issues when you have big trees that are near your property. Now, if you can imagine how big the tree is up on top as far as the branches, they are the same on the bottom with the roots. So with the tree, it's pretty natural for it to always seek water. So you have a lot of moisture that is typically under your foundation. So the roots are going to go through the soil and typically go under your foundation. Now, depending on how big the roots can get, what ends up happening is it will then dig through the soil. So at that point, the soil then rises, and if it continues to grow, the roots get bigger, it presses your soil up and then rises your foundation. That's where you start to have issues. The other thing is if you plan on chopping a tree and the roots are big, and if they're very big and there's a void in it after you chop it and potentially the roots decay and it starts to shrink, that potentially can cause foundation issues as well. It just really depends. It's, depending on the root, it's just, you never know. So that is another thing that could potentially happen. Now, with the high pressure line that comes into your house, with a lot of your older properties, you're going to have copper line. So with the copper line coming in, that's what was used back then. I had a property that had the same issue. We had little small pinholes that were being created because the roots, when it grows, what it'll do is it'll rub against the copper line. And when that happens, it'll start to create little small holes. Now, initially, it'll maybe start dripping, and then you'll just start to see it in your front of your lawn where you actually just have a puddle of water that starts to create out of the middle of nowhere. Then you're going to know that you have some issues there. You're going to have somebody come out and dig it, pinpoint it, and then they will then repair that section. Now, the issue that I had was it was a property that was built in the 60s, so we continue to have these pinhole issues. So what we ended up doing was we replaced the whole line. So we left the old line alone. We then digged a new line and we used a PEX line. PEX line is it's a new material. Feel free to just Google it. You'll get a little bit more information on it. And it's a new way that you can run a line than using anything else. It's the best thing to use at this point. So that's what we ended up doing was we connected it from the street, from the sidewalk, and then ran it straight up to the foundation, where we then connected it at that point. So that way we would avoid it because the trees were in the yard. And that's where all the issues were happening, is where the line was running through the yard. So that's one issue that it's pretty common actually to have as well. Now, the other thing is the sewer line. Now, when you're doing cleaning products and you're cleaning your tub, now, if you actually start to see rust, clean it up immediately, okay? If you leave it, what ends up happening is, actually eating to your tub, okay? And that's typically gonna happen where the sewer drain is, because you have cleaning products, and a lot of times it may sit there, and if the chemical is too strong, what it'll end up doing is it'll actually eat into it, and then it causes issues. So be mindful of that. I had an issue with that with one of our properties. And what we ended up having to do is we had to actually replace the whole tub, got the foundation repaired at that point. But this property was pretty bad. So it had a combination of trees and it had a combination of the issue that I just talked about, because what ended up happening was the soil went up. We actually had to wait. So we had to wait because it was an active leak. We actually waited 3 weeks to kind of let the soil kind of dry out a little bit. It's not going to help like a whole lot, but we did the most that we can at the time. So that way we then had the foundation company come in and work on it. Now, the other thing is when you're talking about sewer lines, another common thing that happens. So let's say you had a Christmas party, you had a bunch of people over, you guys did cooking, it could be from the toilet, right? So what ends up happening is, let's say they clogged it and the sewer line got clogged. Now you call a company out there to actually snake the sewer line to clear it, right? Now, a lot of times these guys aren't careful. They don't use cameras just to be 100% sure where the issue is. Now, in your sewer line, it can curve and it can move in a lot of different direction, and it can split in a lot of ways down there that you're not aware of. They're not going to be aware of it as well. So when they snake it, if they did not use a camera, they can't really determine where, if they hit something, if it actually is something that is the cause of the backage, the cause of it actually being backed up. So they continue to push it. And some of these guys, I mean, they're not going to be as careful as you would, it's your own house. So you're going to be careful, right? So they'll continue to jam it. And a lot of times when they put too much pressure on it, and it is actually where the line is curving, so it turns, so you got that 90 degree. And if that 90 degree, the way it is, they continue to jam it. And if it's not solid and a strong 90 degree angle, and if it's old, right, you will then fracture it. You can fracture it, or you can actually put a whole hole in it. Just depends on how old it is, right? Then at that point, then you're going to have roots go in there, and roots going to expand it. And then annually, you're going to have, or even 6 months. I mean, I had it where roots were growing in there, and it would have been every quarter. So whatever happening is you have to get somebody out there to actually put a camera on there, determine where that fracture is at that point, and then you would then have to go in there and get them to repair it. It could be very expensive. The reason why it's expensive, because they would actually either have to trench in, or they would have to actually break the concrete on top, depending on how deep it is. Okay. Now the other thing is with the sewer line. Now, if you have old sewer line back in the 60s, the other property that I had that had the tub issues. Well, what ended up happening was they actually had cast iron under there as well. So what ends up happening with cast iron is the bottom of the line, they call it channeling. So with grease and things, products and stuff that you put over time, what ends up happening is the bottom of the pipe, it'll end up basically corroding. And once that corrodes, then you end up going to basically all of the water and waste is going to then go into the soil. So that's another thing that actually happens pretty common as well. So when you are having foundation repaired, or even if it had gotten repaired, you know what? It's a lot of work and it's a lot of money. I highly suggest for you guys, just go ahead and spend that extra money to get it checked out. Have somebody to check it out. Camera can be pricey. The guys that I have access to charges me $350. I've seen it where guys charge up to, hourly, up to everything said and done, $900 to $1,000. So be mindful of that. Okay. Now the other thing is drainage. If you have poor drainage, now if you have gutters out in the house, and if you don't have gutters, what ends up happening is the water is just going to go straight down into the soil. It hits the soil, and then it will cause erosion as well. So gutters are going to be pretty critical. You want to have the proper drainage. The other thing with drainage, you can install French drains. So with French drains, it is drains that you actually will install, and it'll be flush with your your landscape. So what ends up happening is as water builds up, it will then go into the French drains. You'll have a line then out to the front yard, to the back alley, however you have it set up. And then that's typically how you would get rid of additional water that's sitting there. So that's the other thing too, is make sure that when you have a water puddle, typically you do not want it to sit more than 24 to 48 hours max. Because if it continues to have those issues, then you know that you have a drainage problem. Okay, so French drains is kind of ideally the number one thing that you want to use to address those issues. And you also need to make sure that you have gutters, because if you don't have gutters, you can't redirect that water to somewhere else and then, you know, redirect it to your driveway, sidewalk, or what have you, to then remove it from your foundation a lot quicker. Okay. The other thing was leveling as well. You always want to make sure that the soil is leveled properly, so that way it is going away from your foundation, and that's going to be a cause a lot of times from erosion. Now, if you guys look at when you're walking down the sidewalk and it's heated, and if you look up to the side, you'll tend to see the soil pull away from the grass, and that is one of the cause of having things heated up because of our climate. So the other thing that we have here in Texas is our climate here gets pretty crazy, it gets really hot. So with that happening, what ends up happening there is it dries out the soil at that point. So when it dries out the soil, you then have erosions at that point, because it'll pull away, and a lot of times the grass is gonna die at that point. So having some landscape around that area helps. Having a soaker hose will help as well. But a lot of times, you know, it's just not enough. You just have to be mindful. You have to pay attention to your landscape, the grass, because we start to have water restrictions. So you can use a circle hose, and you can water by hand. But that's one of the things that you have to be mindful and go out and double check to make sure all that's functioning properly. You can have that circle hose on a timer, so that way it'll just, you know, come on for a period of time and then shut off at that point. Okay, so those are the typical things that you typically have issues with when it comes to foundation. Now, I am going to have a few more videos. I didn't want to cover it because it's just really a lot of information to cover in one video. I'm going to cover out how to hire a foundation company, what to look out for. Should you hire your own structural engineer, or should you use theirs? Things to look out for as far as warranty. How does warranty work? Workmanship. So be on the lookout for my next video. I'm going to cover in detail exactly what I have done and things that you can avoid, that I did not avoid, that cost me money. So hopefully you can leverage my knowledge, my loss, so that way you can avoid those issues. Other than that, guys, have a fantastic week. If there's anything else that you would like for me to cover, feel free to comment, let me know. Otherwise than that, have a fantastic day, and look out for my next video. Take care. Bye-bye.